Hello, I'm Bakhtiar Sanov and you're watching A News. Let's see the top stories. The French government collapses as MPs vote to oust Prime Minister François Bayrou. Norway's Labour Party claims victory in the general election. And the United Nations condemns the terror attack in Jerusalem, offering condolences to victims' families. The French government has collapsed, plunging key budget talks into turmoil after the Prime Minister lost a confidence vote in Parliament. François Bayrou is set to hand his resignation today. President Emmanuel Macron says he will appoint a new Prime Minister in the coming days. Rose Cullen reports from Paris.
Well, France has been plunged back into political turmoil after the decision on Monday by MPs to vote out François Bayrou and his government here at the Assemblée Nationale, the National Assembly in the centre of the French capital. François Bayrou is now the outgoing French Prime Minister, and he will be formally handing in his resignation to the President on Tuesday. Emmanuel Macron then has a few options. He can appoint a new Prime Minister, call a snap general election, or he himself can resign. That is something that political leaders like Marine Le Pen have been calling for, but something that Emmanuel Macron has ruled out, saying that he intends to serve his full term to April 2027. The challenge will be to try to find a Prime Minister who himself can find a majority in Parliament for a budget. Whoever the President appoints, he or she will have to try to have a majority of MPs voting in favour of those economic plans before the 31st of December 2025. That was the undoing of François Bayrou and his government. The $50 billion worth of savings that he proposed, the 2 public holidays that he proposed scrapping, really found no favour in MPs of all different political parties, and so he was voted out, just like Michel Barnier, the previous Prime Minister, in December 2024, when he also lost a vote of confidence and was ousted from Parliament. All of this must also be seen in the context of what's happening in France on Wednesday. Massive coordinated strike action across the country. Ross Cullen, A News, Paris.
As the crisis in Paris deepens, Emmanuel Macron now faces the task of finding a fifth leader in under 2 years. But experts warn that none of the likely scenarios will deliver a stable majority, making it harder for Macron to push through his deficit-cutting plans.
France has been plunged into fresh political turmoil after the fall of Prime Minister François Bayrou in a dramatic confidence vote in the National Assembly. On Monday, lawmakers voted 364 to 194 against his government, forcing him to present his resignation to President Emmanuel Macron. Bayrou was Macron's 4th Prime Minister in less than 2 years. His defeat leaves the president searching for a 5th, highlighting the instability that has marked his 2nd term.
Je trouve qu'on a I think we have shown an image of the Republic that is honourable and active. And so, from that point of view, I wanted, on behalf of the government, to thank the National Assembly and, as Prime Minister, to thank the members of the government.
The confidence vote was tied to France's strained finances. Last year's deficit was almost double the EU's 3% limit, and public debt has risen to nearly 114% of GDP. Bayrou warned of an existential threat if nothing was done. His plan for 2026 included scrapping 2 national holidays and freezing pensions and welfare to save €44 billion. But opponents from both the left and the far right united against him, accusing Bayrou of masking Macron's responsibility for the crisis. Many analysts called it political suicide, noting he had no need to call the early vote.
I think we will not have a public debt crisis in France this autumn or in next year or even in 2027. But I think that if we don't act now to reduce the public deficit, it could happen that in a few years, maybe 10 years, 15 years, we could be in a situation quite comparable to Greece, and with a real public debt crisis, which means that the investor worldwide doesn't trust the government anymore and doesn't want to lend money to the French government, which leads ultimately to a public debt crisis.
On the streets of Paris, reactions were mixed. Some citizens voiced frustration at the constant changes at the top, while others admitted they were uncertain what to expect next. Many said they felt little confidence that any new prime minister would make a real difference.
I'm relieved, but after that, it's true that I'm particularly worried about the aftermath of events, how things will evolve in this very strange context. I've lived in France for 17 years, and this is something I've never seen before. Political discourse based on hatred, and that's it. So what we're experiencing now is really, it's a little scandalous.
I'm waiting to see what happens if they manage to find someone. But in any case, I don't think it's a very useful decision, and it brings more uncertainty than clarity to French politics today.
For Macron, the options are limited. He could name another centrist, turn to a moderate socialist, or choose a technocrat. None of these choices is likely to secure a parliamentary majority, raising doubts over his deficit-cutting agenda. Names already mentioned include Defence Minister Sébastien Lecornu, Labour Minister Catherine Vautrin, and Finance Minister Éric Lombard. Marine Le Pen's National Rally and the far-left France Unbowed are both calling for snap elections and even Macron's resignation. For now, the president has resisted.
Moving elsewhere in Europe, as Norway's Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre has secured re-election, extending his Labour-led minority government despite record gains for the populist right. The election was dominated by concerns over living costs, inequality and global conflicts.
Norway's Labour Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre has secured a second term after a tightly fought election shaped as much by global politics as by domestic concerns. With nearly all ballots counted, Labour and its allies won 87 of Parliament's 169 seats, just above the threshold for a majority. The campaign was dominated by the cost of living crisis, wealth taxes, and the future of Norway's $2 trillion sovereign wealth fund, the largest in the world. Relations with US President Donald Trump, his tariff threats, and Norway's role in international security also loomed large in the debate.
Dear all, we had a goal in this election, and that was re-election and a continued Labour government.
Støre's critics had once questioned his survival, but his long experience as Prime Minister and former Foreign Minister helped convince voters seeking stability amid the wars in Ukraine and Gaza.
We're going to lead the country finances safely and responsibly so that people's everyday finances are safe and they can afford more.
Labour's revival was also linked to the return of former NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg as finance minister, a move that party members say boosted trust on security and the economy. But the election also marked a sharp turn in Norway's politics. The anti-immigration Progress Party doubled its share and overtook the Conservatives to become the main opposition for the first time. Finance Minister Stoltenberg said the outcome sends a wider signal to Europe.
And it's great to be part of the team of Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre and to see how a social democratic party in Europe can win. Also when we face a surge in the support for the populist right. And I think if there is any lesson to be learned for the rest of Europe is that it is possible to win in a campaign where you have a strong populist right that is actually gaining support on the...
Foreign Minister Espen Barth Eide pledged Norway would stay firm on its global commitments.
Of course, as Foreign Minister, I will continue what we're doing in a strong support for Ukraine, a strong position on Israel-Palestine, trying to stop the war, get humanitarian aid in.
Official results confirm Labour's narrow victory. Prime Minister Støre will need support from 4 left-wing parties to pass legislation, with negotiations expected on oil policy, climate targets and the management of Norway's sovereign wealth fund. The Progress Party, meanwhile, secured its best result to date, becoming the main opposition in Parliament.
Nepal's Prime Minister Sharma Oli resigned on Tuesday as violent protests continued in the capital Kathmandu. The unrest came a day after security forces clashed with demonstrators, killing at least 19 people. Early on Tuesday, the government lifted a ban on social media platforms including WhatsApp and Instagram and imposed a curfew to prevent further violence. Despite this, according to the New York Times, protesters stormed government buildings, set fire to the houses of top leaders, and burned party offices. Helicopters were used to airlift ministers to safety, and domestic flights from Kathmandu's airport were cancelled after reports of fires nearby. Several other lawmakers and 4 cabinet ministers, including 3 from the Nepali Congress, also resigned amid the chaos. The United Nations Secretary General has strongly condemned the terror attack on a bus in Jerusalem on Monday. Paramedics and police report that 6 people were killed and 12 others injured when 2 gunmen opened fire at a bus stop on the city's northern outskirts. The victims included 3 men in their 30s and a man and a woman in their 50s. Police said a security officer and a civilian shot and killed the attackers at the scene. No group has claimed responsibility, but Hamas praised the assault while security forces sealed off the area for forensic checks. Israeli President Isaac Herzog called the terror attack brutal.
The Secretary General strongly condemned the terror attack on a bus in Jerusalem, in which at least 6 people were killed and many others injured. He conveys his heartfelt condolences to the families of the victims and wishes a full and speedy recovery to those who were wounded.
Remaining with Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned residents of Gaza City to evacuate after Israel announced it would intensify airstrikes in the area. He said Israeli forces are preparing for a ground operation after destroying 50 terror towers over the past 2 days. Addressing Gaza residents, he warned, quote, "You have been warned, leave now." And moving to North America, the Trump administration has launched a new immigration crackdown in Chicago, Illinois, dubbed Operation Midway Blitz. The Department of Homeland Security said the operation targets immigrants in the United States illegally with serious criminal records, but provided no details on its scale. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson said they had received no official notice, calling the move a political stunt. Local leaders also warned that federal raids could intimidate communities, even as DHS maintained it was focused on what it described as the worst of the worst. Welcome back to A News. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has urged the residents of Gaza City to evacuate, warning of intensified airstrikes after 6 people were killed in a shooting attack in Jerusalem. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz has promised what he called a powerful hurricane of strikes on Gaza. Hamas, while calling the Jerusalem shootings a natural response to occupation, has stopped short of claiming responsibility. Meanwhile, Hamas says it has received some ideas from the United States through mediators on how to reach a ceasefire agreement, stressing its readiness to release the 48 remaining hostages in Gaza in exchange for a clear declaration ending the war. To help us understand these developments and their broader implications, we are joined by Dawood Kutab, former professor of journalism at Princeton University, who is speaking to us live from Amman, Jordan. Mr. Kutab, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Mr. Kutab, first, how do you interpret Netanyahu's urgent call for Gaza City residents to evacuate? Does it signal an imminent escalation?
Well, it's a new old effort. The Israelis for the last 2 years have been trying their best to ethnically cleanse Gaza, to force Palestinians to leave Gaza, and this has been opposed by the Egyptians, Jordanians, and other countries, as well as most Western countries, because this is a war crime. What Netanyahu is trying to do is use the conflict and war against Gaza and against Hamas to basically accomplish the dream of many Israelis of having a land without the people. And Palestinians who lost their land in 1948 and 1967 have learned the lesson of not leaving, because those who left at that time have never been allowed to return, and so Palestinians will not leave. Unfortunately, many of them are losing their lives and getting hungry and starving because of their position.
Israel's defense minister spoke of a powerful hurricane of strikes. How significant is this rhetoric, and how does it shape the psychological aspect of this conflict?
Well, unfortunately, the victims are the people in Gaza and the civilians in Gaza, which in itself is a war crime. Hamas is not, the Israelis are trying to use the people to put pressure on Hamas, but Hamas is an ideological organization that is built on an ideology, and so they feel that they are in a religious ideological war with Israel, which is also carrying out a religious conflict, claiming that God gave them the land and so on. Mm-hmm. So this is a conflict that unfortunately has become unresolvable because of the religious aspect and the ideological aspect, and the people, the innocent people, are the victims, whether it's in Israel or in Palestine, in Jerusalem or in Gaza.
Mr. Kutab, Hamas described the Jerusalem shootings as a natural response, but stopped short of claiming responsibility. What message is Hamas sending with this ambiguity?
Well, I think it's a message everywhere around the world. People are saying, the Newton's law says that if every action has a reaction, opposite in direction and equal in power. And Palestinians are not in war with Israel, but Israel is trying to annihilate national aspirations of Palestinians. And it's unfortunate when civilians are killed, whether it's Palestinians or the Israelis. But the fact is that when you continue to kill civilians and attack, bring down buildings, when you bring down a building, you have to spend a lot of time putting the weapons in the building. So it's clearly not a target. There's no Hamas fighters in that building, so it's a collective punishment against the Palestinians. And some people, react in a violent way. I'm against the violence on both sides. We need to end this war and allow Palestinians to have a free and democratic state alongside of Israel.
Hamas says it has received some ideas from the United States through mediators. What do you think these ideas could entail?
Well, it's clear that President Trump gave the Israelis a short period to finish whatever they want to do in Gaza. And now the discussion and the effort is on what happens on the day after the end of the war and the ceasefire. So apparently some of the discussion is about a total exchange of prisoners and an end of the war. Of course, the Israelis have all kinds of conditions of staying in Gaza or having control over Gaza, and Hamas is saying, if you want to end the war, you have to withdraw from the Gaza. So it seems that these are some of the obstacles, and the mechanism of how they will end the war, where Israel will go, who will give the guarantees, and will the guarantees be ironclad, strong guarantees? Because people do not depend on the Israelis or even the Trump administration to be honest in their guarantees.
Hamas has also linked a hostage release to a clear declaration ending the war. How realistic is this demand given Israel's current stance?
Well, as I said, Hamas has been ready from day one to release all the prisoners. It's the Israelis who have been, let's say, hesitating in allowing prisoners to be released because they don't want to pay the price of either releasing Palestinian prisoners or allowing Hamas to continue. And so we've been in this cycle of violence for 2 years now because of the reluctance of the Israelis to act in a proper humanitarian way and not in an ideological revenge way.
Mr. Kutab, what role do you see the United States playing in this round of mediation? Is Washington in a position to pressure both sides?
I don't think the Americans are too excited about pressuring Netanyahu. All the pressure is going on the Palestinian side, even though they are the victims of a war on them. It's not a real war in between two militaries. It's a crushing, violent attack against innocent people. The question is how serious is the White House in trying to end the war? If they want to end the war, they could end it overnight. They need to put pressure on the Israelis. There's little pressure to be done on the Palestinians. As long as they said they will release all the hostages, it seems to me that the pressure needs to be on Israel to end the war. If the Israelis end the war, then the question is who will control Gaza? And Hamas said they don't want to control Gaza. They agreed to Palestinian civilian, civilians to control Gaza. So the question is, will Israel withdraw from Gaza?
So what do you think, how much influence do regional mediators like Egypt and Qatar retain in shaping a possible ceasefire?
I don't think the mediators have a big role. It's the big power is in Washington and in Tel Aviv. If they want to end the war, they can end the war.
So could the hostage issue be the key bargaining chip that unlocks broader progress toward a ceasefire, or is it only one piece of a larger puzzle?
Unfortunately for the civilians and for the hostages and for the Palestinian prisoners in Israel held without question and being also starved like the people of Gaza, these are unfortunately victims of a power struggle between people in Washington and Tel Aviv and their political ambitions. Unfortunately, civilians, prisoners, hostages are paying the price.
Mr. Kutab, how is public opinion in the Palestinian territories, especially in Gaza and the West Bank, shaping Hamas's negotiating position?
Look, people are tired of war, they're tired of violence, but nothing is happening. And so people lost trust in Arab countries, lost trust in the Palestinian leadership, certainly lost trust in the international community and the US and UK and France and Europe to bring an end to this unfair and uneven war and genocide against the Palestinians. So people are frustrated. We might have a big explosion in the West Bank if things continue in the way they are, because the settlers are being violent and nobody's putting a stop to their action. The Palestinian government is corrupt. So there's a lot of signals that there will be a big explosion in the West Bank.
And on the Israeli side, how is Netanyahu balancing domestic political pressure with the international calls for restraint?
Well, the Netanyahu government is run by a war criminal who is also wanted in an Israeli war, an Israeli court for corruption. So his job, his goal is to stay in power because that's the only way he stays out of prison. So it's a very unusual situation where the prime minister of a country cares only about himself and staying out of prison, then about his own people, his own hostages, and world peace. So unless there is extreme price for their action, Israel will continue its war on Gaza.
So, Mr. Kutab, if no ceasefire is reached, what are the likely humanitarian consequences for Gaza, given the evacuation orders and intensified strikes?
Well, a lot depends on the modalities, who will be in charge of Gaza, which countries, if all the countries of the region are supporting this deal financially and politically, and if there is genuine quiet, then we can expect and hope for the rebuilding process and hopefully a long-term peace between Israel and Palestinians. Right now, everyone is focused on ending the war.
Daud Kutab, former professor of journalism at Princeton University, joining us from Amman. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency are going to meet at the expert level in the coming days to discuss the new bilateral cooperation modality following the 12-day Israel-Iran war that targeted Tehran's nuclear sites. Our Turaj Shiralilo has more.
Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baqai said that representatives from Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency IAEA will be meeting to continue their talks at the expert-level discussions about the future format of cooperation after Iran's civilian nuclear sites were bombed last June. Speaking at the weekly press conference today, following the third round of talks between Iranian and IAEA experts in Vienna on Friday and Saturday, the spokesman said that there are ongoing contacts despite of the legislation on suspension of the relations with the UN nuclear watchdog. According to Baqai, the IAEA has come to the conclusion that Tehran's views on a new mode of cooperation shall be heard and its concerns be addressed after Iran's nuclear sites under the UN safeguards were bombed by Israel and the US. The Iranian diplomat also termed as positive the talks between Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and the European Union's foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas in Doha, Qatar last week. The Doha meeting took place after the European powers, France, Germany and the UK, which are signatories of the 2015 Iran Nuclear Agreement or JCPOA, in a letter to the UN Security Council in August, referred their dispute with Tehran to the world body. Iran, together with China and Russia, which are also parties to the JCPOA, as well as Security Council permanent members with veto power, sent a joint letter rejecting the call by the European Troika on demanding return of Iran's nuclear sanctions. Moreover, Russia and China have proposed a resolution to extend Iran's nuclear sanctions exemptions for 6 months, and in the meantime, to continue negotiations over reaching an agreement with Tehran. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman said that in addition to China and Russia, there are other members of the Security Council which are not satisfied with the E3's move calling for a snapback of the nuclear sanctions under Resolution 2231, which expires in October. Turaj Shiralilo, reporting for A News TV, Tehran.
Afghanistan and Turkmenistan are pushing ahead with major energy projects, including new power lines and the Tapi gas pipeline. The two countries say talks in Kabul mark a step toward stronger regional cooperation. Our Tamim Bahis has more from in Kabul.
Afghanistan's Minister of Water and Energy Abdulatif Mansour met with Turkmenistan's Minister of Energy along with the head of the international TAP project and Turkmen ambassador. The two sides discussed major regional projects, including the transmission of 1,000 megawatts of electricity from Turkmenistan to Kabul, speeding up the TAP 500 power line and advancing the multi-billion-dollar Tapi gas pipeline project. Minister Mansour emphasized Afghanistan's readiness to coordinate and fully support the implementation of these projects. He also reaffirmed the Islamic Emirates' commitment to strengthening bilateral ties, particularly in the fields of water and energy development. The Turkmen energy minister expressed condolences for the victims of the recent earthquake in eastern Afghanistan and praised ongoing cooperation. He said Turkmenistan is fully prepared to move forward with all agreed projects, noting that the international TAP electricity project is already making solid progress. Both sides concluded the meeting by stressing the importance of expanding relations and ensuring long-term constructive cooperation. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
Uzbekistan has sent humanitarian aid to Afghanistan following the recent deadly earthquake, delivering food, medicine and blankets. Separately, the two countries signed a major $250 million worth energy deal to boost Afghanistan's power supply and infrastructure. Our Sevil Rajapova has more.
Following an earthquake in Afghanistan with a magnitude of 6, Uzbekistan sent humanitarian aid to assist the affected population. A convoy of 14 trucks departed from Termez carrying nearly 265 tons of essential goods. The shipment included flour, rice, sugar, pasta, vegetable oil, beans, and other food products, as well as medicines and more than 5,000 blankets. The cargo was delivered to Balkh province and officially handed over at the Hayratan crossing. During the ceremony, representatives from both sides highlighted the importance of timely assistance in times of crisis and emphasized that such cooperation demonstrates the strength of good neighborly relations. Alongside this, Uzbekistan's Ministry of Energy, together with Afghanistan's electricity company, Da Afghanistan Breshan Shirkat, signed a $250 million agreement to modernize the country's power infrastructure. The projects covered by this agreement include the construction of a 500 kilovolt transmission line from Suhan to Puli-Kumburi. The Arkhanty substation near Kabul will be expanded, increasing its capacity to handle imported electricity. In the east of the country, a new 220 kilovolt line to the Sheikh Misri substation will be built, along with the complete modernization of the Sheikh Misri substation in Kandahar province. Once completed, these projects are expected to allow Afghanistan to import between 800 and 1,000 megawatts of electricity from Uzbekistan. The new infrastructure will help stabilize electricity delivery to central and southern provinces, ensuring more reliable power for households, businesses, and essential services. Together, these efforts underline a practical and steadily development partnership between the two countries. It's Sivida Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
A new freight train service has been launched from Guangzhou, the capital of Guangdong province, one of China's most economically developed regions, to Istanbul. The route passes through Central Asia, the Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan and Georgia before reaching Turkey via the Black Sea. The inaugural train departed Guangzhou International Port on 6 September, carrying 40 food containers with household appliances, clothing and other goods. The route marks a significant step forward in establishing a logistics corridor between Turkey and the Greater Bay Area, which encompasses Guangdong, Hong Kong and Macau. Firefighting efforts continue in Turkey's southeastern Hakkari region after a blaze that was mostly controlled on Sunday reignited early on Monday.
A forest fire that broke out on Sunday evening in Turkey's Hakkari province, Şemdinli district, spread rapidly due to strong winds and reignited this morning, prompting renewed firefighting efforts. Teams from the Forestry Directorate, District Gendarmerie, AFAD, Health Directorate, Special Administration, fire brigades and local security guards are working with villagers to prevent the fire from reaching residential areas. Helicopters from Elazığ, an eastern province of Turkey, have completed 6 aerial sorties. Precautions have been taken for 21 households, and 25 gendarmerie personnel are on site to reduce the risk of carbon monoxide poisoning. Residents were safely evacuated, and crews continue to work to fully extinguish the blaze. The cause of the fire remains unknown, but similar blazes have been linked to human activity and climate conditions. Southeastern regions like Hakkari face heightened fire risks due to high temperatures and dry weather, with experts warning that climate change is making wildfires more frequent and intense.
U.S. lawmakers have proposed new conditions on future F-35 sales to Turkey under the 2026 defense bill. The bipartisan amendment would prohibit deliveries unless the White House certifies that Ankara is not supporting or cooperating militarily with Russia, China, Iran or North Korea. Another provision calls for a detailed investigation into whether Turkey harbors Hamas members or assets and how its regional activities impact U.S. and allied security. Turkey was expelled from the F-35 program in 2019 after acquiring Russia's S-400 system, and Congress has since resisted its return. Now, air quality remains a pressing issue worldwide, and Georgia is no exception. According to new data from the Swiss company IQ Air, Georgia holds an average position in global rankings. But how does the country compare to its neighbors, and what does this mean for the health of its citizens? Our correspondent has more.
New data from Swiss-based monitor IQ Air shows that Georgia ranks 72nd out of 138 countries for air pollution. That places it ahead of Armenia, Azerbaijan and Turkey, but behind Russia. Despite the ranking, pollution levels remain 3 times higher than the safe limit set by the World Health Organization. Experts point to aging vehicles, reliance on fossil fuels, and rapid urban growth in cities like Tbilisi, Kutaisi, and Rustavi. Still, the trend is improving. In 2023 and 2024, Georgia ranked 62nd place, suggesting some progress even as major challenges persist. Environmental specialists stress that real change will require systemic reforms, including investment in clean energy, sustainable transport, and stricter environmental regulations. And across the South Caucasus, similar pressures are mounting, with rising temperatures, industrial emissions, and water scarcity driving regional environmental concerns. It's Nini Nikolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, A News.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned to A News for more.